in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first session. I hope everyone is ready to go with our course. And I wanted to just see if I've got Jeffrey. You're here, and I can hear you.
Yes, Judith, I'm here, and good day to everyone else.
Okay, that's a very good afternoon to you, Jeffrey. And Brian, our very special panel guest today, can I hear you? Not quite yet. I've got Brian maybe on the phone.
Yeah, well, while Judith gets the phone, great to have people on board. I see we've got 6 on there, which is great. I'm not sure how we're going to go with this. It's all a bit of a learning curve for us, but it's great to see Judith. Judith's just running out there to the phone, but great to see her getting behind this. And I'm very supportive. As people know, I've sort of been trying to do holistic sort of management since really about 97. So, and I'm pleased to see that Mitchell and Roma areas probably got the first hub, and we were just trying to set this up as a bit of a working group for people that could work through the program, or work through the courses online, and we're just here to try and help or assist in that process. I also appreciate Brian Warburg was coming on today to be our special guest today, and he's an accredited trainer, of course, done a lot of training in this area and probably lived for a while in Arcadia Valley, etc. Are you back there now, Judith?
I'm back here. That was someone else apologising, and I'm just seeing if I can invite or ask Brian to come. Okay, we'll start moving on into the key insights, and we'll see if Brian comes.
No, we'll just wing it, and hopefully Brian will come along, Judith.
Yeah, okay then. So this week's material is all about the 4 key insights from holistic management, which is holism, brittleness of the environment, the predator-prey impact, and timing. And I've tried to sort of provide people with a bit of an overview. And we'll try and give you our understanding of what the course material is, but the idea here is it's a really working through what the material is. So you might need to get a hold of the Savory's book or something else if you wanted to find out more about each of these things. But we'll try and give you our best understanding, and Brian, once he comes along as well, will definitely be helping with that as well. So holism is essential. Nature functions in whole. So we were talking about this just earlier, Jeffrey, how we'd explain this as being wholes in other wholes, and complexity as opposed to something being complicated.
Yeah, Judith, that seemed to be a new term that we got from Zimbabwe. I guess that Savory come up with. The whole work within wholes, and the universe works in wholes, or nature mainly works within wholes. Bruce Ward, an old ex-accreditor that's passed on now, had done the training, and he described it once, I remember, as, well, let's be standing there looking at a field or whatever, and our body, all the cells that are in our body, make us up as a human. Millions of cells work within each other, and then he looked at it across the field and said, and then we can influence the field. So wholes work within wholes, and the whole planet is sort of one ecosystem. That's the way I think of it. And of course, we go into stuff like, well, Savory does in the book, those that have read the book, like you can't study anything in isolation, and he uses the term of hydrogen and oxygen. Of course, if he had a team of scientists studying everything about oxygen and then another team everything about hydrogen, brought them all together, put them in one room and asked them about water, they wouldn't know. So it's the soil, the air, all working together, the atmosphere, the soil, and the whole environment working together as one whole system. Now, he calls that complex. So things like complex things are things that we're having trouble with in the planet. All those natural things, forestries, etc., grazing lands, all the things that are desertifying we're having problem with are complex things. Other things, complicated things, are like engines or things we build or singular things we build. And the way he described it in Zimbabwe was like if we had an engine or something and a spark plug was missing, it wouldn't work. But with complex things, a part could be missing and it finds a new balance, and that's what happens within nature. And there was quite a few experiments he leads to with taking a predator starfish out of an ecosystem, and then the whole collapsed and there was hardly any of the species left and things like that. So that's the way I like to think of that, Judith, is complex, is things that the human brain really can't understand. And another thing we were just talking about is, say we were drafting a mob of cattle and we were getting a few fat cows off to sell, and we were trying to draft them and remember that, well, we could just count the fat cows probably, but if we started trying to count the fat cows and the weaners and the steers and probably the wet cows as well, not just the dry ones, that would be a complex thing, and our brain would not be able to handle it. Or not too many people I know, and I wouldn't be able to handle any more than just counting the one dry cows, etc. So that's the way he describes it, wholes within wholes, and nature works within cycles. And it's complex, and the human brain has trouble understanding it. Now, this was an insight that that's been around for a while. Savory doesn't want to credit it to doing this. This has been known for a long time, and he's just probably put these four insights together, and they work together. And it wasn't until the scientists sort of got to know them all and put them together that they realised some of this stuff that the course is going to be about. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And Brian, can I just test? I've unmuted you, so you should be able to speak. Hello, Brian. I still can't hear him. Okay, we'll keep going. So holism, the next goes to the next question, which was the first activity that we looked at, which was to create a bit of a spiderweb mind map on, we're just choosing one object or one person, and to write down all the things that are related to that. So you think, so basically to bring that together and work out how people interact or connect with others or think about what combines to make different products. So I had a bit of a go at that, and Jeff has as well. So this was my very brief example, and I did this in January. My daughter had a horse in the backyard, and we decided that we would have the horse in to eat away some of the grass around the beehives, and so it was a little bit about land management. But then you know, we had an owner, we were sort of doing a favour for the owner. They had horses in town, and we had all these dung, and all these beetles came, and then you know, my daughter's chook started chasing dung beetles in the backyard, which was very entertaining. And my daughter fed all of the apples. Basically, there's no apples in the fridge, and then she started on all the carrots. So we had to go to the grocery store. So I had a very limited mind map when I first did mine, and I thought about this, you know, Rubik's Cube when I was thinking about it, because there is you can't really change any of those dimensions without changing something else on the other side of it. If those represented different parts of the environment, you can see you can't really change one of them without having changed the other one. Jeffrey has come up with a bit of a mind map. Do you want to quickly explain? I don't know whether people can see it, but you can see in the centre of it, he's got a jumper, a woolly jumper.
Yeah, it was winter time and I was looking for a jumper, I guess, Judith, but I think my spider web, he might have been on, he might have been drinking alcohol or had some drugs or something, and he made a pretty funny sort of a web. But the woolen jumper, you know, went to the sheep, to the labour, to the shearing shed for money for the farmer. Then he spent the money on food, you know, and wages and stuff. He had to water the sheep, so he probably had a bore, all that sort of stuff. It went a bit crazy. And then he had to have grazing too, of course, so he went to plants and grazing. And then he had weeds, so he probably had to spray his weeds. I'm not sure what that other stuff is there, but yeah, he was a pretty active little spider web, my fella, but it was all interconnected. And I think it just shows that, you know, the connectivity and the complexity of some of this stuff. And I think that's what they were looking for in the course. So yeah, I just took a photo of that and sent it off, and I haven't had any report about it yet, but it was pretty rough. But yeah, that's what I think it's about. And later on with the Rubik's Cube, I think was a great analogy, Judith, because you know, it does affect, if you affect one thing, you affect them all, and it's the same with here, but it's being complex. Maybe if we could still have the weeds, so the weeds dropped out of it, it'd be complexity of it, it wouldn't affect it, but it'd affect the balance type stuff. And I think that's what we're getting at, that everything's interrelated. So I think that's what they're asking for on the course there, yeah, so that's what I sent them off.
Okay. Now, Gavin's online from Kununurra. I don't know whether he's bought himself a microphone, a headset with a microphone yet, but I'll just unmute you for a second, Gavin, and see if you can talk to us.
No, maybe we've got a problem there, Judith.
Yeah, maybe we do. Okay, we'll keep going. On to the brittleness scale. So the brittleness scale, we're viewing environments in a whole new way, and I have got one image which I borrowed from the course materials, and it's just got, it's a scale from 1 to 10, so you can see a scale of 1 would be a rainforest, and a scale of 10 would be a desert, just to remind people which way the brittleness scale goes. And that's a fairly easy one to find online. Have you got any comments about the brittleness scale?
Yes, Judith, I have. I think this brittleness scale is something that we have trouble with the academics. I honestly do. They don't understand it, and it's got to be taken in context. And that's why later on in the course we come to work out they call it the holistic context now, which in my day used to be the goal, or the holistic goal is where you want it to be. So if you're managing a piece of land, where you sit on that brittleness scale and what you want as your goal or your context is how you manage the country. And it's important to work out where you live, where you think that country you're managing and what part of that scale you're in. I think I'm probably around 7, but you no need to be exact. It's just that some of these tools work differently in 1, 2, 3 and 4 probably. Grazing animals didn't originally live there. Everything mulched, they're humid, and stuff mulches back into the soil. If a tree falls over in the rainforest, it gets mulch and stuff growing on it. In a few years, it disappears. Civilization that failed in those type of areas, in a few years, the jungle just reclaimed them back. When we're more on the other side, probably 7, 8, 9 and 10, civilizations that have failed there and built big things, well, they turned the land into desert, and it's still a desert today. It didn't recover. So that's basically what I see as the brittleness scale, but I really think this is a problem why we run into a lot of trouble with academics, because they do not understand that tools work differently, like fire, grazing, etc. works different in one area to the other. So it's important that you work out where you are on the brittleness scale. If you're towards the brittleness end, like the 7, 8, 9 and 10, it's very important to keep the ground covered. If you're down on the other end of the scale, it's probably nearly impossible to bear the ground. It just, everything grows, it gets covered naturally. And that is a very big thing in holistic management, is to understand where you are on the brittleness scale and manage the tools accordingly to move it towards the area you want it to be in. So I don't know if that's covered it enough, Judith, but that's the way I see the brittleness scale. I think it's very important. It's something Savory invented himself. Insects and stuff die off in the brittle end of the scale in the wintertime or the dry season, and there's nothing there to mulch that back into the soil. The big lot of grass that grew in the wet season, the only way you can put it back usually is with fire or with ruminant animals, where it's moist and warm and moist enough to mulch that back down and dung and put it back into the soil through the dung, etc. In the other end, in the non-brittle areas, well, you don't really need ruminant animals there. There's lots of insects, lots of things, lots of fungus and stuff will just mulch things back into the soil pretty quickly for you.
Okay. That's great. People are chatting with me, asking, so guys, you can ask questions just by chatting in. I haven't been able to open up the lines enough, and I think it's something to do with the bandwidth, but we'll continue on. So the first question was based on the brittleness scale. Would you say that in general where you live is non-brittle, a 1 to 3, moderately brittle, which is a 4 to 6, very brittle, which is a 7 to 9? I think I had discussion with Brian. He said he thought it might be a 6. I think it might be a 7 here where we are in Mitchell. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I said a 7 before, Judith, and I always worked on being around a 7. I think it's very important for us to keep the land covered. We've got, we've got a lot of bare ground around, and a lot of erosion has happened around these areas since we brought in grazing animals. So I think it's very important. So I'd put us up around the 7, probably even a little bit higher sometimes, depending on the season, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the way I've always operated, around the 7.
So we've got one comment coming in saying atmospheric humidity and not necessarily rainfall is the most the best indicator of where you are on the brittleness scale. So we were looking at some photos which would demonstrate where we are on the brittleness scale. So here we have a nice photo. We're always talking about dung. So yesterday we took a photo of this piece of dung, and the interesting thing about this is there's no dung beetles or insects that are helping to process this dung at the moment. How could we get some more dung beetles? I know Peter Combinones are pretty hot on dung beetles and those sort of things, but how could we increase that, do you reckon, Jeff?
Yeah, well, it is a fellow around that you can test, send them off and see what dung beetles you've got. I forget his name, but all our dung beetles come from Africa, of course, in a big program they had back in the 60s. They shut it down, I think, in the mid-70s. But there is other ones over there that could operate in colder. And one of the stipulations when they came out here, I know, was they didn't want ones that would work under trees. So there is dung beetles in Africa that does work under trees, and probably do work on a wider range of area. This photo was taken at my place yesterday. Interesting to see this time of year that dung's still not too bad. It's still got that little calendar sort of stuff about it. I'm not feeding any protein or anything, although the grass, is frosted and that at the moment. But they must be getting still a little bit of green. It has sort of dried off a bit, but still no dung beetles working, and it'll probably stay there until, when the season breaks, Christmas time, probably November or whenever. You get the 2 lots of rain, the dung beetles come back, and hopefully they'll still eat that old stuff. We did turn that over, and there was a few insect sort of things operating underneath it, where it must have been a bit warmer or whatever. But definitely a couple of months ago, that would have been gone in a few hours. The dung beetles are working pretty good in that country, yeah.
Yeah. So Gavin Scott, he's over in Western Australia, and he's saying most of the land that he manages would be about a 7, with some ecosystems being closer to the non-brittle end, the remnant rainforest areas. So thanks very much for that comment, Gavin. We really appreciate being able to hear from something over the Western Australian side. Next photo that we had, this actually is from my place on the weekend. And the grass is dry. Well, this is a frost effect, but that you've got that brown sort of colour to it where it's oxidising. So that's another example of a brittle environment, I believe, where the only way that will be processed now, if it stays standing, it will remain there for a long time. The only way it will remain processed is if something tramples it or something processes it.
Yeah, interesting slide, Judith. I see there's a little bit of green there. It's a buffle, of course, but I don't know if that's a little bit of something else, a little herbage or something growing in the buffle there, but it's interesting to know that it's struck where there's a bit of shelter. There's a lot of bare ground there, and not many other seedlings or anything growing in around, and I don't know, could like a track over here on the bottom right-hand side. I don't know if that's a bloody kangaroo or a dog track, but yeah, that's definitely showing a pretty brittle environment, I would suggest, and probably rest or partial rest.
Yeah.
That was my conclusion to that, yeah. And it looks like it could handle a bit of disturbance, and I'd say if there's a little bit of buffle there, if you've got cattle and dung and stuff in there, tightly bunched, you'd promote buffle growth.
Yes. So the next slide is this massive growth. So this happened for us with that rainfall we had over December, January, and we got this massive growth, and you really see it, in that rainy, wet period where you have all these sort of, wildflowers at that stage, but where you've got almost 100% ground cover, but that's not what, grows quite quickly. And as Brian will be saying to me, well, they're all annuals as well. There's probably not a lot of perennials in there either. So that's another characteristic of our environment. I think you get that massive growth when you do get the rain. And the next photo, Brian will be laughing at. So this also, you see a lot of sticks not processing on the ground, a lot of water movement here, but also, nothing, sticks are staying on the ground but not actually processing because that lack of humidity, and that's water's been backed up there behind a tree that fell over, and you can see the amount of growth and amount of nutrient that happened there, but where all the water's washing away, well, there's not a lot of growth happening there either. And another one, I mean, Brian was asking me if I had any photos that just made you go, oh, and that's one that where you look at the amount of water movement in the last couple of years around that Buffle.
Yeah, good slides, Judith, and good demonstration, I reckon, of what we got. So there's a lot of soil lost there with that pedestal on that Buffle there. It's just amazing that, it shows the buffalo has tried to hold that there. So if we would have had thicker sort of buffalo, I guess it would have been a lot better. But good photos. The water cycle's definitely not working there. It's all running away. Interesting, in the previous slide, if we could just go back to it, I'm not sure if people just quite understood that looked like a log that had fell down there. And it did hold up a bit of soil or a bit of seed, etc., etc. With the holistic stuff, you'd think that ground would need some sort of seeding or stuff, but the idea is that the planet's full of seeds, the world's full of seeds, and you just got to make it want to grow there. So, but I'd say, well, going back to the DPI, they'd probably call that D country, and you'd need to probably put some mechanical. I think the classification of D is that you need some mechanical stuff. So maybe you would need a bit of, a crocodile or a bit of seeding or something on that country, which would be really beneficial, I'd say. But you can actually see there's been a lot of water movement, a lot of capping. It's sort of pretty hard water runoff there, yeah. But interesting slides.
Yeah. So I've got another one just about the brittleness. In brittle environments, why has the presence of large groups of herding animals and their predators so important to that health of that land? And yeah,
I can have a little talk about that. I seem to be saying a fair bit, but I'd like Brian to have a talk too. I guess it goes in these brittle environments. They naturally had large herding animals on them, and of course we'll get all this say that that didn't happen in Australia, blah blah. But we've got these animals here in Australia now, so we need to manage them accordingly with the grasses and the dung beetles and everything that come with them. So they evolved. There was a synergy between the herding animals and the environment or the soil that they lived on, that they evolved together. On these big grasslands of the world, they were always had herding animals on them in large herds. They were kept tightly bunched by the predators, of course. And anyone that's kept animals, they don't like feeding on an area they've dunged and fouled on, etc. So they were kept tightly bunched. They grazed it really severely, moved off that area and didn't come back until the rain come and washed that fouling off, and this give it time to recover. And I think this is very important that we make early in here, we make a decision between recovery and rest. I know a lot of DPI fellas and still talk about rest as improving country, to just let it rest and it'll come back. Now this happens of course for a year or 2 years or 3 years, but after 4 or 5 years, rest is really serious and deteriorates the country, because it needs the herding animals, it needs to be grazed to remove those solar panels, what I call the leaves, the solar panels, remove them so new ones can grow, etc., etc. And this is what evolved together. I honestly believe, which Christine Jones does, if anyone's studied any of her stuff, that the grasslands sort of made the beautiful soil of the Darling Downs, etc., and the prairies from the natural rocks and stuff that they had there, of course, but with all their root system and the organic matter and the stuff they put deep down into the soil, they made those beautiful soils. Today, of course, most of them are ploughed up and got annuals on them, so most of the cultivations are on those big grasslands. And of course, the trees and forests are still stoking up carbon, but it's strange that the grasslands are not. And I believe it's because they're not covered in perennial grasses anymore. They're ploughed up and put annuals on them. So, yeah, I don't know if that covered enough, Judith. That's my take on that.
Yeah, I think that Brian's here with us. Are you here with us now, Brian?
I am indeed, I think, Judith. Thank you very much.
You are indeed.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Fantastic.
Have you heard any of us, Brian, or you?
I've been listening, Jeff. Well done. Now, just one point I'd like to add to what you said, Jeff, was brittleness is nothing really to do with rainfall. It's all
No.
about atmospheric humidity.
Yeah, someone
at
else
soil
made that comment.
surface.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, good point, Brian. Yeah, picks up on any of that stuff, mate. Totally agree. Yeah. Do you agree that ground edge is probably on the... Sorry?
Parts of Europe have 20 inches and extremely non-brittle. Very difficult to find bare soil. Whereas parts of Australia and certainly parts of Africa would get 36 inches a year, but very, very seasonal. So you'd probably have only two months when it's non-brittle, when it's moist.
That's right.
Sorry, and the rest of the year is extremely dry. So yep, no, good point.
We see this in the Gulf and that too, of course, in Australia. Big high rainfalls at times, but very brittle environments. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Brian.
Very good. So that's the second key insight. The third key insight is, of course, the predator-prey connection, that properly managed livestock can improve land. And for this one, I've got a poll set up. So in the third insight, the predator-prey connection, which of the following describes the behaviour of animals in the presence of predators? So I'll just open this poll for us, and then we should be able to have people put their answers in. I think you should be able to see the poll at the moment. And I haven't got a do not know. I haven't added that one in. I'm not being a terribly good researcher, but I'll give you a few seconds to think about that one and to put in your answer while we try to remember what we answered.
Yeah, this looks like it's come straight from the course. A lot of the course materials like this, Judith. But happy to have Brian have a talk, seeing we've got him now on some of this stuff. It'd be great to hear his insight into some of this. You there, Brian?
Yeah, we're just waiting for the people to vote. So I've got a few people voted.
Okay.
And everyone's pretty much onto it. They're all saying...
Oh, I haven't. Sorry. I'll go all of the above. Can't. Click all of the above. No, it didn't work.
Okay, so yeah, everyone agrees that all of the above happen. So I'll share the results of that one, but you can see that all of the above, we're pretty unanimous on that one, so that was fairly easy. Any comments about that one, Brian?
No, it's all going well. It's just that again, when animals are bunched and moving, as Jeff described, and moving away from the smell of their dung and urine, it also concentrates dung and urine, and so you get a much more even spread of dung and urine. So often you go into properties and the animals all go and lie down and chew their cud around the trough or under the trees or whatever, and you get total fouling and almost pollution in those areas, whereas the rest of the paddock's crying out for some nutrient. So again, just bunching those animals does tend to create a more even spread of nutrients and better cycling from that angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, bro. Could I just make a comment there? I have a bit of trouble with a few of the academics or whatever with nutrient export, and they say, oh yeah, but you're taking a 800 kg bullock off and you're exporting all your nutrients away. But Brian, have you got any figures at hand of how much that bullock's 4-year-old bullock would cycle in his lifetime? That's what I'd love, how much nutrients he would recycle and generate in a lifetime. That'd be a great study, I reckon, compared to the 700 or 800 kgs that got exported off. He'd recycle thousands of tonnes of forage, wouldn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, 500 kg bullock probably eating about 20 kgs of dry matter a day. So depending on the quality of your feed, that would be a huge amount. Jeff, I mean, the purists are right. Cycling minerals, and it's all about, there's a known amount of mineral in the world. It's just how quickly we can cycle it that allows us to utilize it to create a quality of life for ourselves. And as soon as you do export some off, yes, it's going to take a long time for it to come back. I always ask folks, most of us sent in the soil sample sometime in our life, and you send in probably about 6 cupfuls of soil, and if you actually analyze what comes back on the soil analysis sheet, it normally adds up to somewhere between 4 and 5% of what you sent them. And my question is always, well, what was all the other stuff in the bag that you sent in? And again, the answer is it's just soil, it's just minerals, but they're not available to the plant. So there's only two ways we can make those minerals available to the plant, and that's chemically or biologically. And biologically is far, far better because it stays in the soil. As soon as you chemically release those minerals, they either leach or oxidize and go up to the atmosphere. So, the animals play a key component in keeping those minerals cycling biologically rather than chemically.
Yeah, great, Brian. Thank you. Yeah, well, just I'm always on the lookout. We cop a lot of negativity. It won't work because, and I think that's something we need to probably put together as a bit of a list of things. Well, this is how you answer that, and that's a great one, Brian, because I cop that all the time. You exporting all the minerals off the property, etc. So, but compared to what they really recycle in their lifetime, it's nearly insignificant, I think. Yeah.
That's great. So this middle photo is really just one footprint, and that's not enough animals, but this bottom photo we were trying to get some indication. This was some sheep that were bunched on Dreamland just for a day or so, and that was trying to get an indication of, and there's a human footprint is there as well, but just trying to get an indication of how much disturbance you can get in the soil, and we're only probably not running enough at the moment, but there's they're certainly making some indentations in the soil, and that's all we're trying to show with those three photos. And the final question in this section was about Lords of Nature. So did you get around to watching that video? I've got a clip here from it, just the photo from it, and it was about those wolves in the United States and reintroducing them. And the question is around how that might work in our environment here in Australia. And what I was thinking when I was looking at all the deer and how they took over because they weren't being hunted by the wolves, I was thinking of, about some of our natives that probably don't get hunted around as much too.
And is this where they destroyed all the trees or something on the rivers and that, Judith, was it? I'm not sure if I've seen this, but yeah, that's basically what happened once it's the complex situation and the hulls again, it's working in cycles. So you removed the predators or whatever, killed them out or shot them out, destroyed them because they were killing the animals, and then for some other reason desertified the land. Exactly what Savoury talks about in Zambezi too, of course.
Mm. Yeah, I was at dinner a couple of weeks ago, and someone heard that I'd been to Zimbabwe. It was quite an elderly gentleman, and he recounted how they went on a wildlife trip in Africa, and they saw two lions, and one lion was well and the other lion had been injured. And all the people in the tour wanted to know why the reservist hadn't taken the other lion that was injured in and take it inside and rehome it or try and fix it, try and help it so that it could be re-released. And the people were trying to explain that this is the process of nature, that it's not pretty really, that, this dominant lion was keeping the other lion around, but it wasn't feeding it, wasn't necessarily nurturing it. And in, the rule of nature is quite different to what humans sometimes view it as, and you can think, well, you're removing all of these really savage animals out of the environment, but they're performing a function. And we were talking about the starfish as well, weren't we, Jeff, just recently? There's a really good animation in the course about the starfish, and it was removed from the reef, and what happened was that the number of the diversity of different species in the reef decreased to about 3, because once you've got the starfish gone, then a lot of other species that would normally be predated upon just increase so much that they dominate it. And so, you would think that by removing something as like a starfish, you'd actually be improving the environment, and sharks, I suppose, would be the same. But you've got these number of, big predator animals that seem to have this natural function that probably humans don't understand that well.
Yeah, society probably doesn't understand, like it's dog eat dog out there, whether you're in a creek with a mob of fish or whatever. It's survival of the fittest, I guess, and we probably always thought the lions were the king of the jungles or the plains or whatever, but maybe the ruminant animals were, because they lived on them. But yeah, no, interesting, and that's exactly what we've been talking about, I guess.
Yeah, so I've got a question from Gavin, well, a comment from Gavin. So when I think of herding predators in Australia, I think of dingoes. Though dingoes are often persecuted by farmers, any thoughts? Could we bring back the dingoes to naturally herd cattle? Yeah, I think there definitely is something to be said for removing all of the dingoes from the environment. And I think, maybe it's a limited time where where society will remove them all, and they do have a function. And I think even with sheep, there should be a way that you can manage them. When we were in South Africa, they actually had a lot more predators than we had. They had lions, and they penned them up. But my family's been in sheep for a long time, and before the 30s, people used to herd them and lock them up at night. And I still know people above Roma here who have smaller flocks of sheep, but they lock them up. And perhaps, as dedicated people, we shouldn't be vilifying the dingo so much, because they have a really interesting role to play. And right here where we are, we have the dingo barrier fence, and it's very interesting when you look, we're south of the dingo barrier fence, and we definitely have a lot more kangaroos in our area. And north of the dingo barrier fence, which is where dingoes have been allowed to rule at, there's definitely less herds of kangaroos causing so much problem. So, I'd like to research it a little bit. Jeffrey always goes crook at me because he's worried about my father, who, has been in sheep for such a long time, and dingoes are they're so brutal on sheep. But I still think there are other options rather than killing all of the dingoes. So I agree. I think that definitely that's something that I'm very cognizant of, at least. Brian, I don't know if you've got any comments about that.
Hi, Judith. Judith, that's probably one of the biggest things about holistic management is the change of our thinking. And I constantly find in Australia this idea of ferals and non-natives. People constantly have that vocabulary. And really, biodiversity has been shifting around the world forever. We've just speeded it up a bit. And especially in Australia, I think people focus on the handful of species that have caused us problems, the cane toad, the rabbit, etc. But when you look at the benign introductions, those introductions that have been fantastic and have helped humanity in Australia, they number hundreds, if not thousands. So, rice avocados, guinea fowl, cattle, it's huge numbers of benign introductions. And we automatically say if it's not native, it's bad. And really, that's just mind games. If something like the dung beetles can be brought into the environment in a controlled fashion, that improve the environment, that improve biodiversity, that make for happier families and more stable communities, well, we should be doing that. Whether we could bring in predators, apex predators, I severely doubt that. But as long as we understand the role that they played in keeping animals bunched and moving, we can simulate that with either human labour or technology.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, great point, Brian. I'd like to make a comment on that, Judith, with just what I found. I think back in about maybe the 70s or the late 70s when 1080 came out, we completely wiped the dingo out for years. Like we went probably 10 years, and I'm out in the dingo country opposite to Judith. And the wallabies just took over. Not so much kangaroos. I guess there was kangaroos, but the wallabies just came phenomenal. And then they slowly came back and sort of learned to handle 1080 a bit. We still bait a bit regularly, but mainly to keep the neighbours happy. But when you bunched all your cattle, I don't think it's a natural for them to kill calves. It's a sort of a learned behaviour, and you might get an old bitch with a mob of pups and some weak heifers calving, and they start getting a few afterbirths, and then they maybe might get a dead calf, and then they start to kill calves. So it's a learned behaviour, and she'll probably teach that whole litter to do it. If you can go out and get those ones, find out those ones, and when you've got your cattle tightly bunched and you go to them every day, you'll see the old cows, or what are they looking at over there? And the dogs that are interested in cattle, you could probably shoot the other ones that are out running around chasing wallabies and killing rabbits or whatever are probably doing a good job for you. So that's the only comment I got. But I know with sheep it's a bit different. So I'm talking cattle. And with sheep, I think it's a management thing, like Judith said in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, what we saw there. Everything killed their goats, and they just had to manage them and look after them. And it's the same here. They've got donkeys and dogs and stuff that do that. So whatever works, I think you have to do. But definitely, if you take the main predator out of them, they will explode, of course, and cause problems somewhere down the line that we probably haven't seen.
Yeah.
And this is what's happened inside the barrier fence. I think, Judith, there were 2 predators originally here in Australia that kept the roos. We cop a lot of flack about too many roos, total grazing pressure. We can't do holistic management because the roos just eat it all. If we grow too, that's just like saying, we don't want to grow grass because the roos are going to eat it. But if everyone was doing it around, we'll just be the same amount of roos and grow a lot more grass. So that's just my opinion of it, yeah. But I think it's it's a management thing, or it's a management thing all the time. You've got to protect your animals, protect them from the predators. The predators probably do a good job sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
Jeff,
All right.
Yes? Judith, if I may, there was some research up at Darwin, presented at Darwin 2 months ago, and I think I'm correct in saying they were studying the gut contents of dingoes up the top end, and 30% of their gut contents is cat. So again, that sort of throws a wild card into the equation, but for me it just highlights that the more species you can have in an environment, the more the balance plays out. As soon as Jeff said, you start reducing diversity of numbers, you start getting these huge peaks and spikes and things become problems.
Yeah, good point, Brian. We did a lot of this with QMDC too, through Brian Marshall's, a lot of stomach sampling stuff with work we do on mainly the coal seam gas companies. So if you were interested in that, I could get you some of that stuff. A lot of even dog eat dog, a bit of carrion, cats, and a fair bit of rabbit up there at some stages, and not much calf actually, yeah. So it's interesting, yeah. We've done some good work on that. I've got some good figures on that if you're interested in it, yeah.
Yeah, well, we could perhaps,
Jeff.
if you give me the link to that, Jeff, we can send it around with the recording afterwards. Okay. Yeah, we could definitely include that if people are interested.
Yeah, we'll try and get that. I don't know if I can get it to you today, but no, we'll try and do that, Judith. Yeah, there's some good stuff on that.
All right, so the final one is that timing is everything, and this is, well, I don't know if I can explain it especially good, but the fact that you really just want stock to be taking one bite of that plant and then moving along. The same thing with the predator pressure. You really just want them to be taking that one bite and not to be coming back for the second or third or fourth or fifth bite and forcing that plant to grow sideways or not to grow at all. So jumping right into the poll, I don't know whether you want to do more of that. I'll put the poll up and maybe Jeff or Brian, you can explain a little bit more if you think it needs more explaining. Would go into the poll. Overgrazing of plants and damage from trampling has more to do with animal numbers than how long those animals are in the pasture. Is that true or false? You should be able to see the poll there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can I can do that, but I'll click on it. I'm happy to talk about it. Brian will be good too. I'm happy to hear what he has to say about it. But you were right in for thousands of years, I think everyone just thought it was too many animals, was overgrazing, and a lot of people still do. And some of the studies and stuff, well, people try and do studies on this, and they probably lock up a little bit of country for a while, and it recovers for a couple of years, and they take a photo of that, and then the project runs out of money. So, it looks good 2 years later, and they've proved it. They knew that's what they were going to prove, and they say, I told you so, and file that away. So I think in Savory's book, he went back and found one of these plots that they'd done back in the 60s or something, and they'd used a photo that taken 2 years later, and he went back and found it completely desertified, so just turned to desert. It's interesting that he says partial rest and over rest, really not much difference. It still damages land, so if we're running cattle conventionally, let's call it, in Australia, the way we sort of grandfathers did it, well, it's just like over-resting. It does cause problems and cause thickening too, thickening vegetation too, which was an interesting thing. So yeah, that's my take on it. But love to hear Brian talk about it.
Yeah, we think it's all agree that it's false. So it's a bit of a negatively couched question, that one, but we agree that it's all false. That one. That was just a photo that we took yesterday of the horse sort of taking the second or third or fourth or fifth bite of the grass, I guess. The next one, overgrazing occurs when, I'll just open the poll so we can answer it.
Could we just go back to the horse one for a minute, Judith?
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe not. Sorry. Have we taken too long?
No, not at all. I don't know. Can you see the picture of the horse at the moment?
No, it didn't come back. But I was just going to, interested to see about, Brian said about a diversity of animals, a diversity model of grazing animals. We, for a while, run our horses with the cattle, and it was interesting to watch them graze. They actually do graze a little bit different from cattle, and cattle, yeah, I think the horses tend to eat some of that more over-rested type grass, where the cows try to bury in and munch it, but they do graze in big mouthfuls. But horses can be a little bit more selective, and they actually bite, where the cows sort of just mainly chomp it off, which I found a bit interesting. So yeah, it didn't come back up, Judith, but no, that was just on the lawn, where I let the horse in on the lawn to have a bit of a graze.
Yeah, I think if I close this particular poll, I won't be able to open it unless I go back into settings. So I just thought we'll do this question at the moment, looking at overgrazing occurs when animals eat too much of the available grass, too many animals graze too small a paddock, animals spend too much time grazing. We'll need to bring up the other thing. We can't really view the whole thing, can we? And then animals trample the grasses, and then all of the above. So we got the right answer. I'll just show it for you. It's the one that actually includes the recovery word. So the animals spend too much time grazing in a particular place. Is the correct answer for that one. So you guys are 100%. Hold on. I have just navigated away from the horse. All right, now we should have the horse back. Do I have it?
No, it's fine, Judith. I was just going to, we sort of took that photo as a bit of a demonstration of overgrazing, I guess, yesterday because of their webinar. So we let him in on the lawn. But it's interesting to see that lawn has runners and stuff, so it is very hard. Although that's been mowed, hasn't really been grazed. It's still sort of a little bit of ground cover there,
yep,
which is a bit different than a natural environment here, I guess. But it definitely, we were looking to show overgrazing there.
Yeah.
Second bite.
Okay, so this photo and the next. Sorry, Brian.
I just, again, language I think is really, really important, and this idea of a second bite, while we understand what we're talking about, when we talk about second bite to people who haven't got the understanding, they get a different perception. So I think we need to be a little bit careful with the language. You know, when you talk second bite, how do you stop an animal taking a second bite? Well, you can't.
Yes. No.
You can't. You can just limit the time that they're exposed to the plant and the time they come back onto the plant. And really, it's it's getting people to understand that time and disregard height and disregard how many bites it takes. You know, a cow with a big tongue can go in and within seconds of opening the gate drop that plant right down to ground level if it's the most desirable plant in the paddock.
And then possibly even if she's only there for a couple of days, she'll come back and nibble it off again. Yeah, couldn't agree more, Brian. Thanks. Yeah, good point.
Possibly, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got to limit the possibility of second bites, I guess.
And, you know, Jeff and I were talking about this particular photo here, which comes from Christine Jones's site, and the potential for it to give people a wrong idea as well. It sort of suggests that if you take the top of the plant back to only that height, then the bottom of the plant will also reduce as well. But it's not like immediately reduces, and that you cut those branches in this, or roots in this particular example, it happens in a much more subtle way. Was, you know, one of the other things we were talking about, whether we would include these two photos from Christine's side, you know, in thinking about, you know, this timing is everything process.
Yeah, I think it's probably just in relationship to what's above is what below, but it just melts away like someone getting skinnier or something. I think the roots just lose all their stuff. It doesn't just get cut off nice and neat like that. They just lose all their moisture, etc., etc.
Jeff, I think. Yeah, I think if anybody hasn't yet seen Elaine Ingham's presentation at the Savory Institute London conference last year, Elaine certainly has changed my thinking and everybody I speak to in terms of those earlier pictures, like that one of Christine's. You know, within seconds of the plant actually being chewed or defoliated, mowed or whatever, it'll pump out exudate, so liquid carbon into the soil. Plants will only actually reduce their root mass if overgrazing occurs, i.e. animals come back too quickly or stay too long. But they don't actually reduce root mass on a normal grazing. They do reduce energy, and it's liquid energy. It's exudates pumped out into the root zone.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
yeah, that
often
sounds
you go
like
into a
some
pasture and
stuff. Yeah,
yep,
thanks for that,
often
Brian.
you
It'll be
go
great.
into the pasture and you'll see plants pulled up, a whole mass of plants pulled up, good, delicious plants. And what's happened is their root mass has disappeared from overgrazing, not normal grazing, overgrazing.
Yeah.
Yes, we agree.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and it just goes to show that we move on. You know, it's probably a while since Brian, the two Brians actually, done the training with me, and it's good to hear a new thing that's happening. It's just like these learning centres, we're continually learning. And anyone that's been exposed to Christine Jones stuff, I know she's copped a lot of flack as well, but some of the stuff she talks about really makes sense to me. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Brian.
No, Christine's fantastic, but I strongly suggest going to have a look at that webinar from the London conference, because Elaine Ingham has great evidence in terms of you know, photographs, etc.
Yeah.
Would you be able to send us a link, or you got that link yet?
I've actually watched the presentation. I find it really, you know, it takes a long time to become as expert in the choice of words that Brian has, and you don't realise just, you know, how many times you've got to read. I've done the course about 4 times, this particular part of the course about 4 times. I'm still learning stuff from it, and, you know, Brian, he chooses his words so carefully, and you don't realise how carefully chosen they are until you start doing something like this. Okay,
Can I have another comment there? And I think it's great, Brian, that that we need at this early stage, the terminology is great, but I think it's important that we get out too that we're not going to tell anyone how to graze. We're not going to tell them how to use any tools or what to do. And I think Brian Marshall was great at this also. We'll just give you this information and you use it how you want to. And I think that's what both the Brians that I've been exposed to, Brian Marshall and Brian Wilberg, they've been great at doing that. And I've been at that course with Brian Marshall where people nearly get frustrated with him. They just want him to give him a silver bullet and they'll go away and do it. But it just really doesn't work like that. It's just you take this information, you work it into how you want to work it for what you want. And I think it's really important that we do that, plus the terminology stuff. Brian, great that you're picking us up on some of that. I really appreciate that. And I say just like to make that point that it's important that people understand. They're not going to just go through this course and we're going to tell them how to make money. It's only the start. They have to do it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's really great to have you on the call, Brian. And I've also got a question here from Gavin. So he says, if timing is the most important factor, is choosing the right number of animals to use in a particular area a matter of trial and error, trying to create a high concentration of animals in a paddock? So the question again, if timing is the most important factor, is choosing the right number of animals to use in a particular area a matter of trial and error, trying to create a high concentration of animals in a paddock?
Well, I could have a go at that, Brian, but you'd probably do a much better job. It sort of all depends on how many paddocks you got. Your cattle have got to be somewhere, or your stock have got to be somewhere. And it depends on how quick the grass is recovering, if it's recovering quick. It's not really the amount of animals. I'd say you put all your animals there, even if it's only for 4 hours, or 4 days, but make sure it's recovered before you come back. So that's going to be management, how many paddocks or how often, what you're going to do. That's how I would answer that. But I'm happy to hear I'd love to hear what Brian's got to say on it.
Super. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff, again, I suppose there are no silver bullets, and it's observation becomes a key component in terms of management. Humans love the idea that we can flick a switch and it'll all work for us. But when we're dealing with something as complex as nature, it's always changing. We need to be observant. So put the animals in the paddock and be observant, see what happens. One thing I'd just like to say though is timing. The grazing animal provides two tools. There's the impact and there's grazing, and they're separate. So when we look at grazing, how do we as managers manage the tool of grazing provided by grazing animals? Well, it's about time. It's about limiting overgrazing. So it's limiting the time the animals spend on the paddock or the time they come back to it. On the other side of the coin is the impact. And the impact is all about density. And I think that was sort of tied in with your question there. If we want to create a powerful tool of impact, the more dense we can get those animals, the better. So whether you do it with lick blocks, salt blocks, putting the dogs around them, or making smaller paddocks, increases the density, which increases your animal impact as a tool. The other tool, as I said, which is quite different, so density, we manage density by impact by creating density. Grazing we manage by managing the time, and there are various tools and techniques to make that. But we try and match our production of grass to the number of animals we run. There's no point in stocking up on animals when you don't have the grass. And there are various tools for measuring how much feed you think you may produce in a season.
Yes, good, and it's good to realise the impact and the grazing is separate. That's a great point, because quite often you'll have a really desertified area where a creek and gully might be starting to erode or etc., and you want to give it a bit of high density. It's probably got no grazing on it because it might be bare soil. So yeah, good point, Brian. Thanks very much.
Okay, well, we're coming up to the 1.5 hour. Oh goodness, I had mimic nature here, because we're saying why. The last question we're going to look at today is, why is the culling of wildlife or reduction of livestock failed to stop overgrazing and deterioration of plants and soils? And the answer that we were talking about before we came on the air was that we were trying to mimic nature, and that culling might not be mimicking nature, I think.
Yeah, well, Jeffrey, here again, I'm quite happy to have a go, and we've only got to have a look at some of the national parks, etc., around here. There's quite a lot of areas where there's not much wildlife left, because most of the wildlife up Mount Moffat up my way is on the neighbour's place, where they've got grazing. So the country's over-rested and burnt. Maybe they go back there when it's burnt for a while, but they've just relied on, like Avery says in his book, they go through the process, let it go back to nature, and then they end up with all this dry grass that's just over-rested, just rotting away, thickening vegetation, etc. So they say, oh, we've got to use fire. Fire's natural, let's use that. But in the book, he explains that quite well, and I think they go through that on the course as well, that no fire lit by human hand is nature, is natural. And, just exactly what we've been talking about. And over-rest, leave it to nature, it doesn't work in these brittle areas, that's all. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and that's the next slide that we've got here. We were talking about yesterday, I kept using the word rest, and probably in the wrong context, and we were talking about recovery and trying to make a conscious effort to really say what we mean. And I came up with these two images. The one was over recovery on the left-hand side, which was more of a healing thing, whereas rest is not doing anything really there. But that was just my take on the difference between rest and recovery, and trying to be really mindful of the way that I'm using the words, because it can be quite confusing.
And I think we started the conversation.
That's very good, Judith.
Yeah, I like that. We started the conversation with that as well, Judith, so it's a good ending point, I think. I think I'm over-rested at the moment. I'm just desertifying, so. But time to heal, and that is the trouble, I think. When it does, they give it a bit of time to heal, and they're still getting the benefit from having grazing, and they shut country up for those couple of years, and they see a big response. And they think, well, we knew that all the time, you know, that's right, that's going to work. But if they only went back 10 years later or 5 years later even and had a look, it doesn't work. So, great example.
Yeah, I'll just share.
Just again to highlight, recovery is plant by plant.
Yes.
And that's what we focus on, whereas we rest environments.
Yeah.
Okay.
We recover plants, we rest environments.
Just while we got you, Brian, Judith and I were discussing yesterday, actually, she's got some growth at the moment with annuals, and she's sort of saying about, well, maybe she needs to monitor how quick they're growing, etc. And I said, well, I wouldn't really probably worry too much about the annuals. What would your take be on that? Because, you know, they're just going to grow from seed and go to seed anyway in 6 weeks and disappear probably. Made me concentrate on the perennials. Would that be good advice, do you think, or what would your take be on that?
Jeff, again, I think focus on the soil surface because the soil surface will dictate what grows there. So if we can get that soil surface loosened, covered, moister, cooler, we'll get life happening. And the successional process will normally start with annuals because, as you said, they grow from seed. But we'll start seeing that shift from annuals to perennials if we continue to do the right thing. The minute we start doing the wrong thing, we'll get a shift back to annuals and or bare ground.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't worry about monitoring the growth of annuals?
No.
No, okay, no, that's good.
So I've noted that they're there, that's all.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, good point. Then they'll be there when there's bare ground, etc.
Yeah, so...
Correct. I think humans tend to focus on individual plants a little bit too much. You know,
Yeah.
we love our clovers, and we really focus on the clover. But I've seen plenty of clover paddocks that have got lots and lots of bare ground and increasing amounts of bare ground between them. And they're just, you know, they're happy that they've got clover. I think we need to
they save our lives sometimes, Brian. They save our life, same as button grass and stuff like that. They grow on bare ground. They save our life sometimes, so we happen to love them, but they only grow on bare ground, so you've only got them for probably 6 weeks at the most. Where perennials, you know, they'll be trapping energy from the sun for whenever it's warm and moist. Could be at 9-10 months of the year sometimes.
Yes. Okay, well, everyone, thank you very much. We've come up to the hour, and it's been such a pleasure to have Brian with us today, and I hope that everyone who's been able to attend for the lunchtime bit of a chat is going to have benefit. I'm sure you will have, and the recording will be available shortly as well, and there's a few people that have mentioned to me that they can't get in during the middle of the day. One guy's had his rhino tank delivered and not able to be with us at lunchtime, but we'll provide the recordings as well. And we'll be back here next week at the same time, and next week is ecosystems processes. So if nothing, it's helping me to be more attentive to the course material, and I'm learning heaps. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm learning heaps. So thank you again, Jeffrey, for coming online and spending your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Brian, for just ringing me and saying, look, I want to help out, and it's been great to have you on the line, and it's been great to have a few other people on the line. Or Gavin's just asking me a question. He says thank you, all very worthwhile. Thank you very much, Gavin, and thanks, guys, for chatting in the chat box. I think with our regional broadband bandwidth, or lack of thereof, we'll have difficulty to allow everyone to speak on a microphone, but we will try and work on getting more people speaking out every week, so perhaps people could have a turn at being on the panel. All right, then, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff.